everyone, it's Amanda with the Happy Arkansan, and today we're going to be talking about skimming books. So I have 3 books that I read in my sociology theory class to kind of give examples of how skimming works. Not to give you homework or anything, but I have this book called The Sociological Imagination, and it's by a sociologist named Sir Mills. It's like one of the biggest works in sociology, but it's hella boring. I'm sorry, that's mean, but it's true. And then I have Irving Goffman's The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, another big work in sociology, again, kind of boring. Very boring, for me at least. And it was hard for me to work it. This one, though, is one of my favorites. It's Racism Without Racists by Eduardo Bonilla Silva, and it's great. So, I love this. This is like my saving grace. This is the book that kept me in graduate school when I was reading books like this and I was going bored out of my mind. So, while these are great works of greatness in sociology, for some people, this is not going to keep their attention, and that's where skimming comes into play. And even books like this, which I read from start to finish, was really hard. I had like 2 weeks to read it, and it wasn't really easy to finish. I finished reading like half of it in that time frame, and then I read the other half after the class was over, because this was like one of the last books we read in that class. I really loved it, but it was just still really hard to read in 2 weeks. So I did have to do a lot of skimming on this one as well, even though I've now finished the entire book. So academic books are heavy, and even the small ones, like the ones I was showing you earlier, are not nearly as big as this. Like, in comparison to this book, it's smaller and it's thinner, as you can see. So this book is really dense though, and it's using language, and I have read books that were like translated from other languages, and it was really hard for me. Like, I literally wanted to drop out of graduate school because I couldn't learn like skimming, and I didn't know that a lot of people were skimming, and I was so worried about what they were doing and how they were keeping up that I didn't like take the time to like sit back with myself and realize there are easier ways to do what I'm doing. And so that's what today's blog post is about, and this is what this video is about, is how to effectively skim a book. Because you don't want to have those feelings of dropping out of school because you can't keep up with reading. You have to like take a step back and understand how to effectively read a book. So the first thing I'll talk about is what you're doing reading the book for. If you're reading the book because you have to write a paper on the book, that's going to require a different level of skimming than if you're just including the book in a paper. Like if you're writing a whole full-fledged paper, and then this is just one resource in a paper. And so that's going to be different from a lot of things. So you have to decide, okay, which one, how am I reading this, why am I reading this, and how in-depth do I need to get when I'm reading this. So if you're writing it for a like 10-point assignment versus a like 500-point paper, that's going to be different. You need to do different levels of skimming, and you need to understand how to differentiate, because you're not going to read every book that's assigned to you. I'm just being honest. Even books. So this is talking about academic books, which are a lot different from like books. So this is more for like books that are like nonfiction. Maybe in the future I'll do one on fiction books, but I haven't really gotten a lot of experience skimming fiction books because I haven't ever had to read a lot of fiction books for class. So this is more for nonfiction books, which are the harder to read, honestly. It's easier to read like fiction books, because a lot of them are fun. Not all of them, but a good portion of fiction books are fun, so it's a little easier. You still have to skim with those too, because you might have like 5 fiction books you need to read, and that's not easy to do. So first we're going to learn about this one. Okay, so the first thing I really encourage everyone to do is to get a good grasp of the table of contents. So depending on the book you have, your table of contents might be more or less straightforward. So for this one, the table of contents looks like this. So I can see here that there are there's 11 chapters in this book, and each of them has a different like thing that is a part of them. So the first chapter is about the strange enigma of race in contemporary America. Then there's the new racism, the U.S. racial structure since the 1960s. And it goes on for like 11 chapters, telling you exactly what each chapter is. So that gives you a kind of look of the overall picture of the book, what the book is talking about. And depending on what you're writing, that might be enough. You might not have to do much more than read the table of contents. More than likely, though, you're probably going to want to do a little bit more. If you're doing like an annotated bibliography where you're just writing a paragraph, your table of contents will be your best friend, but obviously you'll need to kind of skim some more stuff too. You might be able to skim like the back of the book or like the introduction to the book, which will be in the inside of the book. Acknowledgements, nah. No one ever reads the acknowledgements. The preface, it depends. Sometimes I might read the preface. Sometimes I don't. If there's an introduction chapter, this book doesn't have an introduction chapter, read that or skim that. Skim it like you would skim an article, and I have a blog post on skimming articles. And so you want to skim the chapters like you're skimming articles, essentially. It's very similar, except for there are a couple of different pieces that are perfect to skimming a book that are different from skimming an article. And so yeah, so when you're in the actual chapter, so this is a chapter of this book. So you can see that there's titles and there are subheaders. Subheaders are important. So depending on what you're doing, so are you making like an outline of the book? So do you want to learn like every little thing or like one or two things under each heading? And it depends on like what the purpose of your thing is. So like when I read this book for a class, we had to do an outline of the chapters of the book. So literally what I would do is I would just go through the headings and I would write like one or two things about each heading and call that my outline. And so it depends on like what your assignment is, like how you want to skim. If you're writing like a book report, you still don't have to read this entire book. You might have to go a little bit more in depth on each chapter, but the biggest thing when you're skimming a book is to skim, because oftentimes the reason that you're falling behind in your reading is because you start to read. You don't want to read. You don't want to spend multiple minutes getting enthralled in the book. So if it's like a really great book and really riveting, but you're falling behind and you need to get stuff done, stop reading the book. So many people get caught up in like reading, like they'll find a book that they actually really do love and then they'll start reading the book. So one of the things that I love to do is use the Pomodoro method, and I have an app on my phone called Focus Keeper that helps me stay focused. So the reason I love Focus Keeper so much is and the Pomodoro technique for skimming so much is because every 25 minutes it stops you. And so if you're just doing your assignment and you're just going about your day and doing your assignment for hours and hours on end, it's easy to keep doing what you're doing. But with the Pomodoro technique, you have to stop, or you're supposed to stop every 25 to 40 minutes, depending on how long you want to do your Pomodoros. So it makes you assess yourself every 25 minutes. And then during your break, you can be like, am I skimming this or am I reading this? And then you're getting the time, and so you're not spending hours and hours reading when you should have spent hours and hours skimming. And so I really encourage, if you're going to skim, to use the Pomodoro technique, because it makes you assess yourself every 25 minutes to make sure that you're skimming and not reading. That's very important. So, and it's kind of interesting, like sometimes when you are reading, when you're skimming, you do fall in love with certain places of the book. But you have to assess yourself and make sure that you're skimming the book and not just reading the book, because otherwise, and also reading, depending on how fast a reader you are, that's okay. But if you're a slow reader like me, like you need to be skimming instead of reading. So always assess yourself and make sure that you're skimming and not reading. So when you're skimming the book, like I said, I go through every single like little header like I would do an article if I need to be more in depth with my skimming. And so one of the biggest parts though of any chapter or any article or anything like that is the first bit, the first part, and the intro and the conclusion. So the intro and the conclusion of a book chapter is going to be a lot lengthier. And then I kind of just fill in the headers. So I just go into header 1, header 2, header, like all those headers, and I read a couple of things there. And I take notes or I take quotes and stuff as I do it. So the biggest thing though is to have a goal in mind. Like I said in the post, is like whatever you're doing this for, it's going to change how you decide to skim the book, how in depth you go in skimming the book, and just how you decide to go about this, how long you think it's going to take to skim the book, and all of those things. So it's good to be really clear about things, and also understand like some parts of this you don't need to read. So like all of these have a notes section. I don't need the notes section. I just don't need that. I don't need the notes section. I don't need to look at it. I don't need to read it. I don't need to look at the end notes. I'm not here for it. So don't read the notes, because honestly you're not really supposed to read the notes. Those are just there for people to pat themselves on the back and show other academics that they know what they're doing. Just to be honest. And so if it has a conclusion, like this one, like this chapter does, read the conclusion if it'll focus. I have to get like way on it. Conclusion. Read that. And obviously there's other things you don't have to read, like the appendices. Unless your professor says read the appendices, don't read the appendices. And let's see. Selected bibliography. I don't have to read that. Unless you're doing like a paper in which you might want to do the bibliography. Because it will help you, like, unless you're writing a paper, that might help you find other things to talk about. The index can be very helpful if you're doing something about a certain topic. So say you're writing a paper, and so you're writing a paper about the book, and you want to really focus on these 3 different concepts, because it's like a 1,200 word essay, and you want to break it up into 3 different things. So you're saying, I want to talk about this in the book, this in the book, and this in the book. Going back to the index can be really beneficial, because then you can just look up all the instances of that one thing that you want to talk about. So say I want to talk about the dating of minorities, because that's what happens to be a thing in this book. So I can go back in here and see, this has minorities dating up, and it has all of these different things under there. And so then I can write down all those pages and go through and read all of those little spots. And so that's a way for me to read multiple things throughout the book without having to go in and read the entire book. So I found this one thing in the book I want to talk about, and then I'm going to go back into the index and see exactly where in the index it talks about this one topic. Wham bam, thank you ma'am. It's awesome. So I do want to move on to books like this one, because Racism Without Racist was one of the easiest books I've ever read for college. It's something I'm interested in, and it's really well laid out, and it's like a newer book. I think it came out in I think this is the 4th edition, so let's see. This book is very new. It's not like super new, but like this iteration is new, and I think the first time it was published was, let's see here. This is not as new, but this chapter, this was, okay, so maybe it is. Okay, so this copyright is 2014, and I'm not sure if that's the copyright of this particular edition, or if that's the copyright of the entire book, but this is 2014. This one, on the other hand, has been around for a while. This one by C. Wright Mills has been around for literally forever. This iteration of it was 2000, but this has been around since this is 1959, copyright by Oxford University Press, but I feel like this book as a whole has been around for a little longer, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But the book is definitely a lot different. So as you can see, this is the way this book looks, and it just looks like a bunch of words. So it just keeps going and going forever and ever and ever, and there's just a block of text. Nothing is broken up as much on this one, but still what you want to do is get the layout, there's still a good bit of a context or a table of contents, and so you want to be familiar with that, and you want to go and see. So here the contents are: the promise, grand theory, abstract, empiricism, types of practicality, the bureaucratic ethos, and a bunch of other things. So and then I see that there's like a appendix, there's some acknowledgments, an afterword, and an index, which I don't care about. Like I said, when you're reading a book, like unless someone says read this appendix or read this afterword or read this preface, don't. Like it'll save you a lot of time and energy and effort to do that. But again, even this has an index. A lot of academic books have an index. So it's good to be familiar with the table of contents and the index, because that will help you out tremendously when you're reading your paper, reading a book, and when you're just like thinking about how do I want to approach this, what topics are covered the most in this. And so another thing about the index is if you see something with like a lot of something under it, like, and you're writing a paper on the book, maybe that's a topic you want to spend a lot of time on because the author spent a lot of time on that. And so this one, for example, this talks about practicality a lot. So maybe I want to spend a good portion, and I think a chapter was all on practicality. So maybe I want to spend a good time of, if I was writing a paper on the sociological imagination, maybe that's what I want to focus my time and energy on, is reading the chapter on practicality, because it spent a lot of time on practicality. So, or the whatever on practicality. So with this big wall of text, like that's all cool and well and fun, but this one's a little harder to read because it's really not broken up well like this one was. It's broken up by like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which can be a little bit much. So, you just kind of have to kind of think of how would be the best to do that. So again, I would probably just read the first paragraph and the last paragraph of each number, and then decide kind of how I want to go about reading the middle, to see if I need to. For one, like it depends on the assignment, like I said, how far you want to go in depth into it. So that's this one. And this one doesn't seem like a lot, but it was a pain in the booty to read. And then Irving Goffman's The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life is another one of those ones that just kind of goes and drowns and on and on. And I'm probably making enemies in the sociological community, but maybe not, because I feel like a lot of sociologists feel the same way. This one has an introduction chapter, actually, so that's good. And so it gives you like a good, I really do encourage the introduction. Maybe not the preface or the afterwards, but I really kind of encourage the introduction, or just kind of skimming the introduction just to see like what it would be talking about, because I feel like that's always it should be a good glimpse of the overall picture of the book. So this one is a little weirder because it does not, oh yeah, it does have a contents page. So again, read the contents page, kind of see where you can go. It has an index, it has a conclusion and an introduction chapter, so those might be good things to read, more than anything else in the insides. And it also has an index in the back here. Let's see. It doesn't really talk about any one person in particular, or any one thing for a lot of pages. Well, I guess it kind of does. It's just a weird way of doing it. So I would just go through each book, kind of decide like the introduction, the conclusion, if it has those kinds of chapters. Also reading the first and last paragraphs of each chapter, looking at the index, looking at the table of contents to see exactly what's happening. And also just remember that you're skimming and not reading, because I know that when you're reading, like when you pick up a book, it's easy to read because that's what we are taught, to read books. And we start reading books by reading like fun books, but reading academic books is not always fun. And so when you're reading, it gets overwhelming. Reading through a whole book gets overwhelming. And there are some books where you'll want to read the entire book. Like I said, I loved Racism Without Racist. I couldn't skim it because it was so good. I just felt so enthralled by his words. And I loved him, and they were everything I ever wanted to say about race, but I couldn't put into words. For the most part, there were some things I don't agree with him with. I don't agree with him on, but that's a whole nother story. That's not for this video. But just reading and skimming. You'll do a little bit of reading with skimming, but don't pick up the book to like read it word for word, because that's not going to get you in the mood to skim. You need to be strategic, and you need to look through and see, okay, you need to have a plan before you open this up and see this, because if you see this and you just start reading, it's going to get overwhelming, and it's going to get to that point where you don't know what you're going to do, and it's going to be hard. So pick up a book to skim it, not to read it, unless you have time to read it and you want to read it. Like, that's a whole nother thing. Like, if you want to read it, that's fine, but if you want to skim it, pick up the book to skim, not to read. And I hope this video was helpful for you. I like walked you through a couple of different books and how I might go about skimming them and how I might go about like pulling things out. And I hope this was helpful. Bye.